What's up, Pen and The Shank community? I got my wife with me out here today. Say hello, babe.
Hello. Hi.
She's making a cameo appearance on the Pen and The Shank. Why are you making a cameo appearance on the Pen and The Shank today?
Because you want me to.
But the Pen and The Shank is a crime and prison related channel. And what relation do you have to crime and prison? I mean, me, right?
You.
Wait, where you going? Come back. Don't hide from the people. So, what's your relation to crime and prison?
You.
What about yourself? So
Zero.
Who's the heathen criminal in the family?
You are the savage heathen criminal.
Oh, well.
But not anymore.
Well, the Pen and The Shank is grateful to have you on this field trip. So I convinced you to do a double take on this field trip, right?
Yes.
So as you know, the Pen and The Shank is a crime and prison related channel, and we're on a field trip today, and I got my wife with me. She's making a guest appearance, and she's going to hold the camera as I tell you a story about me witnessing someone lose their life on this very corner that we're standing on. I witnessed somebody get blasted on this corner while they were slanging narcotics, and somebody rode up on a bike and literally blasted them. So I'm going to hand this to my wife now, and I'm going to tell you the story. All right, Pen and The Shank family, I want to share with y'all something that happened in around 1991, 1992, when I was in the hospital right behind me. It was New Orleans General Hospital, and I was in there for behavior issues, and it was a place to dodge juvenile detention, such as Louisiana Training Institution, LTI, which I told y'all stories about people being in LTI, and we're going to share more stories in LTI. But I witnessed somebody on this very corner who was slanging narcotics. This was the St. Thomas Housing Project where I'm standing at right now. This was behind me, the whole way where I'm pointing to was all the St. Thomas back in the 80s and the 90s. This was the St. Thomas Project. I'll share some pictures about the St. Thomas Project, but there was somebody right on this very corner. This was the old project buildings, which these buildings aren't the project buildings any longer. They're these new developed, newly modeled buildings, and they don't reflect what the old buildings are. I'm going to try to go around because they kept a couple of the old project buildings up, you know, for historical purposes, and I'll try to find one in it back here so I can show you a picture of it. But they've done it to all the projects, the Calliope, the Melpomene, you know, the St. Bernard. All of them have been torn down and rebuilt with these style buildings. But back when I was in New Orleans General Hospital, this was still a St. Thomas, and it was the old project that was right here. So anyway, dudes would be slanging right here on this corner, and I would be up in the building in the New Orleans General Hospital back in the days, and on this corner they would be slanging on this corner. And I was in the window in the hospital, probably on the 4th or 5th floor, and I was looking down here, and the dude rolled up and he started blasting, you heard me? And when he started shooting, that's when I seen the dude fall out. And this was around 91, 92, and a lot of people was getting their heads busted back here back in those days. And so this was the New Orleans General Hospital, and like I said, this was the St. Thomas. Back at you. So we had an interlude. There was a local resident who just came up, and she didn't want to be in camera. You can see in the background of the film, go look at it, that I cut it off. My wife had to cut it off because she didn't want to be filmed, and had memories. So we stopped and talked to her, and my wife, she said she was from here, right?
Yes.
And so she was from here, and she said she witnessed a lot of children get killed out here when she was growing up, and a lot of innocent children. She said to this very day, even though it's not as bad as it used to be, she said it's still bad that they still have people just a couple of weeks ago that lost his life right up the road, about a block up from where we standing. But she remembered back when this was the project, and back when that was New Orleans General Hospital. So I was on this corner. I mean, I wasn't on this corner. This was the corner where I saw a dude lose his life. I don't even know who the dude was who lost his life, but I was up in the hospital. That's not the hospital. Just like these buildings aren't the old project buildings, that's not the old New Orleans General Hospital. That's a new building. That's been over there for a couple years at most. Because I'm gonna pull pictures, and I'm gonna put a picture up where you can see the old New Orleans General Hospital, so you can see what the old New Orleans General Hospital looked like. But take a walk with me, because I'm gonna show you where the corner was, where we saw there was a lot of slanging. And back when I was in New Orleans General Hospital, it was a place where all the dudes who were dodging LTI, most of the dudes who I was in there with either aren't alive today, or they probably still incarcerated. Very few statistically made it out like I did to live a good life. But they were up in this hospital, which was a juvenile detention holding place, and all we did was fight every day, and it just so happened to be right next to the projects. And so we used to get our canteen from the corner store right on over here. I'm gonna show you where the corner store was. Actually, the building where the corner store was, that building's still there right now. Follow me.
Okay, so you said you were in here for behavior
Yes,
issues?
I was in here because I got arrested in St. Tammany Parish. My parents moved, and they were trying to keep me out of LTI. And the judge said if you can get him in some kind of behavior modification program, we would keep him out of jail. And so that's when I went to New Orleans General. And when I went to New Orleans General, you know, things got even worse. New Orleans General was wild. And there was a lot of dudes that were in New Orleans General. Like I said, they were from the St. Thomas. There was a lot of dudes from Shrewsbury.
Okay.
There was a lot of dudes from Marrero, because I had a partner from Marrero who was in there. And that's how I actually, my mom knew his mom. And that's how she was trying to keep her son out of LTI. And that's how he wound up here. And I recently found out that he lost his life. So rest in peace to him. His name was Todd, and I grew up with him, and I was sorry because I went to look for him so I could talk to him, but he was in here as well, and he lost his life recently, and I'm sorry to hear that because I wasn't able to connect with him. But I'm going to show you the building where we used to look out the buildings, and we could see everything in the projects. And so a lot of the dudes who was up in the hospital with me in the New Orleans General, they call it Cuckoo General, by the way. Everybody in there knew it wasn't New Orleans General. The nickname for this hospital was Cuckoo General because they said you had to be crazy to come here. They had a whole floor, wing that was set for juveniles, but they also had a whole floor that was set for crazy people too. And that's why everybody used to call it the Cuckoo General. And so, we'd be like, man, you're in the Cuckoo General, And so you had, a little stigma to go with it. But
The Cuckoo General.
yeah, they call it the Cuckoo General. So I'm gonna show you the corner store where we used to get our canteen from. All right, here's the store. That building right there was literally the corner store where everything was going down at. Like I said, all the project buildings ain't there no more, and the old New Orleans General Hospital ain't there no more. But that's literally the building that was the convenience store. They used to, I think even back then, the Arabs used to have it. And that's where everybody would go to get their cold drinks, their beer, because you could buy alcohol in New Orleans 24/7. You can get your chips, your hot pickles, and they even sell frozen cups, I think. It was that type
Hucklebucks.
of, yeah, it was like that. And so we could sit, look above, turn around, you can point at the buildings up there. The New Orleans General Hospital was just as tall as this building, probably a little less so. And you could look out the windows from the hospital or the tier you was on, and you could look down and you could see the officer getting your sheet. You would write a list down on a piece of paper, and it would be your name, and you would tell him what he wanted. He went to that corner store with the list that everybody had, and you would pay him a little extra, and he would get what you needed, and he would bring it up to you. And I did about 6 months in New Orleans General Hospital.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was able to avoid going to Louisiana Training Institution. And so that's my story about me watching a guy get shot and unalived on the corner of St. Thomas and Josephine. Right now, I'm on the corner of St. Thomas and Jackson Avenue. You can see it right there. Can you see St. Thomas and Jackson Avenue? So that's St. Thomas and Jackson Avenue. And so back when I was coming up, this was just a rough area. And like I said, I did time with a lot of dudes from back in this project. And I ain't gonna name names, but I know some serious head busters from this project. Personally friends with them, and I don't know if they're alive to this day. I hadn't seen a lot of them, but they probably, dudes had dozens of bodies under their belt, so it was wild back then. But anyway, thanks for watching the Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube. Give me a like and subscribe, and put in the comments, and give my wife a shout out for being a videographer on this. So this is the buildings right here. This is what the old project buildings used to look like. This is the original that was built back in the 1940s, around 1930s, for soldiers coming back from World War II. This is the actual, can you get the courtyard? Yep. So that's the original St. Thomas projects. That's what all the buildings used to look like. And they kept this up for historical purposes. And you got to think, these projects are definitely historical in the sense that these projects weren't built to be ghettos and places where people lost their lives. These projects were originally built for the purpose of soldiers who were coming home from World War II, and they needed a place to stay because they couldn't afford anything else. And that's why this building right here, behind me. This is the original. They call it River Gardens Apartments now, but this is the St. Thomas projects. These buildings are historical because when troops came back from World War II and they didn't have a place to stay, that's what these buildings were built for, to house troops, so they can have a transition to get their lives in order after World War II. So yes, there's definitely historical purpose about the St. Thomas projects. If you look at the history of it, yes, eventually it became cheap housing in a place that became ghettos where they put people who were on welfare, and yes, mostly black folks live back there, you know, throughout the 80s, in the 70s, and the 90s. And yes, a lot of people lost their lives.
And so the housing that we're looking at right now,
this is new.
This is new. Was this before Katrina or after Katrina?
This is started coming around after Katrina. They started building all this stuff up.
Okay.
You know, they might have started tearing down some of the St. Thomas before Hurricane Katrina, but a lot of it they tore down after Katrina, you know. But the St. Thomas was one of those projects, I think, that might have got a head start before the other ones did.
Okay.
When it came to tearing down the projects and rebuilding, you know, because the old project buildings were dilapidated.
Okay.
You couldn't live in them, you know.
And the lady that we were speaking with, the one who didn't want to be filmed, she mentioned that she still doesn't come out at nighttime, right?
Yeah,
Even
she
in
said
present day.
She said she's scared to come out at night. This area was brutal, and New Orleans is still brutal, you know. What it was is, you know, you got a lot of people who moved here and want to be a part of the city, and so they move in these areas not really knowing what they're. Look at this. Look at the sign. Get the sign. Do you see what that sign says, y'all? Potholes all over New Orleans. Look at the sign. It says Epstein files buried here. That's where the Epstein files are buried, according to New Orleanians. You never know what you're going to run into, man. I'm at a red light. We on Magazine Street. But I hope y'all enjoyed this field trip that we had on the Pen and The Shank. And we're going to do more field trips. I want to show y'all more of the city. And we want to talk about, you know, more things. Different things. And as you can see, we potholing it up in New Orleans. Now we on Magazine Street. Babe, since my wife, she's doing a videographer right now. She's the camera lady. She is not from New Orleans. This is Magazine Street. This is one of my wife's favorite streets. She had a friend who's from New Orleans, from the Ninth Ward of New Orleans, who she got real good friends with the church we used to go to. And the Ninth Ward is like 20 minutes on the other side of the New Orleans Bridge. And when you brought her here, what she said?
She didn't know how to get to Magazine.
Well, you got to talk louder.
She didn't know how to get to Magazine Street. We were lost. I think it was raining that day, and she ended up falling asleep while I was driving around trying to find Magazine Street.
And she had never been to Magazine Street.
Nope. And lived in New Orleans all her life. Yep.
So let me tell y'all this. So being a part of New Orleans, there are people who, they don't never leave their projects. She was from the Ninth Ward. So she ain't never left the Ninth Ward, upper lower Ninth Ward. And if you know anything about the Ninth Ward, they didn't come on this side of town because this was uptown. And they were beefing with dudes from the St. Thomas and the Calliope and the Melpomene, you know, the Magnolia. On the other side, you know, you had to cross over toward where they're from. It was the Florida projects and all that out there in the Ninth Ward. And so they didn't come on this side of town because it was dangerous. You could lose your life. That's how serious they were taking them wards, you know, where you were from, you know. And so my wife's friend, being from the Ninth Ward, she was being sincere when she told my wife, I ain't never been on no Magazine Street. Grew up in New Orleans her whole life. She's in her 30s when y'all come out here, right? And she had never been on Magazine Street, y'all.
Yeah.
That's the mentality that people get stuck in out here in these streets, you know. And like I said, we just talked to a lady, and this lady was obviously traumatized and offended that we were out there filming. You know, but she calmed down once she realized that I kind of knew a little history, you know, and I told her I knew some people from the old projects. I did time, you know, she kind of settled down a little bit, you know. I guess, you know, once she started talking to her, she realized, all right, well, you know, I'm going to settle down a little bit now. And I was kind to her. My wife was nice to her. We said, God bless you, have a good day and all that stuff. But people can get triggered real easy, man. And a lot of dudes was riding up and down the block. Even when we was out there doing that video, they were looking at us like, what y'all doing out here? They still slanging out there, even though it's mixed income now. They got white folks that live there now too. So it's mixed income, but they, like she was telling me, the lady was telling me, I said, well, a lot of people who used to grow up in the St. Thomas, they don't live here no more. She said, but they still do. She said, they still got people from the old projects that are third generations, and they still out here. They still in here. To them, she said they still call it that, St. Thomas. But nobody who moves here now, they're not calling it that. They call it the River Bend Apartments, you know, because it's right there by the river, you know. So You know, it's just whatever you say, you know. But now we on Magazine Street, and we're about to pass up Jackson Avenue, which leads right back where we came from. And as you can see, you can zoom around. Even growing up, even though the projects were, Magazine Street was always a good place to be on. But look, you can show them, they got a dude sleeping on the side of the road right there on Magazine Street, you know. So you got the homelessness all throughout the city. And we just saw a dude recently, when we was going to get something to eat, he was taunting another dude right there in the corner, huh?
Yes, he was.
It was a homeless guy, I guess, from the area, and he was literally about to hit a dude who was standing there waiting for a bus or a Uber or whatever. So it's some wild stuff, man. I hope y'all like this video, man. Welcome to the Pen and the Shank, man. Give us a like and subscribe. Let's get it. Cut.